Well, Boker Tov, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. Glad you're here. Glad to be with you. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It was like 82 degrees yesterday at one point here in Texas. It's like a summer day. It was just rather hot outside. Right now, it is like 30 or 40. It was cold. And then tonight it's going to be colder, and we're supposed to get snow and ice Wednesday night or Thursday. So there you go. There's Texas in a nutshell. It is summer. We go from summer to fall, or actually summer, spring, fall, winter. And then on Shabbat, it'll be in the 70s, mid 70s again. So we'll go back to spring. So we have 4 seasons. They just happen within all of our seasons. So, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is Texas. So there's a saying here that if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Yes, yeah. And the Brenners out in there, they live slightly west of us. They had golf ball size hail. We missed all of that. It went around our humble abode. But it's so there you go. So we have hail and ice and rain and snow all in the same time period. So glad you're here. Welcome. Okay, so several things I want to try to get to today. Parashah Vayakhel. I was looking at something here in Orchards of Delight. I just want to mention this to you. There is a comment here in Orchards of Delight about a method of Torah study that is referred to as Pardes. And I'm just going to put this in the notes here online. Pardes. Let's see if I can. Let me do the Hebrew. Oh, yes, it will actually. Let's see. I guess got to remember what key is what here. Some there, and then there. Nope, there. There we go. Pardes. Look at that. I was able to do a little bit of Hebrew on there. Keyboard. Baruch Hashem. So Pardes consists of 4 levels of Torah study or Torah interpretation. And so that word itself means orchard, which is the why the book here is called Orchards of Delights. So the 4 levels of Torah study, I'm just providing this for your interest in information. So the Peshat level is the basic level or straightforward, or actually more literal, the literal meaning. Okay. And then we have Remez. This is kind of fun. I'm having fun with typing. Remez is like the deeper or hinted or okay. And so this is the next level. All right. Look at that. It's just so much fun. And then we have Darash. The Darash is like the allegorical. So allegorical, having to think about speaking and think about spelling at the same time, which is really, really challenging for me. So we have the allegorical and metaphorical. So, or symbolic. Okay, that's another way of saying it. So we have the Darash, was the allegorical, metaphorical, symbolic meaning of the text, which is, as it says here, he writes, is often contained in the body of rabbinic works known as the Midrash. So, hence the Darash version of that. And then we have the Sod level. The Sod is the secret or the mystical level. This is what's known as, now you got to say, okay, this is what's known as Kabbalah, but you got to follow that by going, because everybody's scared of it. So Kabbalah, I'm just kind of half kidding. So Kabbalah is the mystical, all right, enough typing, is the mystical or the secret level, they kind of revealed to, this is typically, he writes here, is typically revealed in the Kabbalistic literature like the Zohar. it's a lot of what Yeshua taught is very Kabbalistic in nature. We talked about that. So a lot of people, and in fact, somebody just asked me recently, that they've heard that, Kabbalah is wicked and evil and diabolical, and you shouldn't read it or stay away from it. And that usually comes from people who have no idea what they're talking about. And it's very common and so on. But Kabbalah is just really looking at the scriptures and saying, okay, what is being spoken of here on a very deep and mystical level? And that's really what Kabbalah is. Actually, it's not spooky or weird. Now, there's people who anything can be made spooky or weird. I guess there's people out there that try to take Judaism and turn it into something else, but those aren't Jews. They're just people who are strange. But that's what Kabbalah is. So I just want to share that with you. Part is those are the 4 levels in which we study the scripture. So on another note, in Parashat Kitisa, actually, I was going to share this on Shabbat and just didn't get around to it. But since we were talking about the Sabbath yesterday, and it's in part of our Torah portion, talking about the Shabbat, I wanted to read this comment from Orchards of Delight, where Rabbi Trugman is talking about the Shabbat. This is what he says. He says, talking about the idea here in context is to be careful that we do not desecrate the Shabbat. How do we desecrate the Shabbat? Well, certainly you can desecrate the Shabbat by doing things that are not permitted on the Shabbat, such as working on the Sabbath. Okay. But there's other ways that we desecrate the Shabbat, which is by acting contrary to the spirit of the day. Okay. And so to desecrate the Shabbat or to make the Shabbat mundane. So the Sabbath is not the day to talk about work or talk about mundane things or talk about politics or talk about this, that, or the other. And it's also not the day to talk about what needs to be done in the week ahead. Shabbat is not the day where we need to be sitting around saying, I need to do this next week and that next week. And boy, I need to get that project done. And boy, I sure need to do this. And boy, that fence over there sure needs to be repaired. In fact, the ancient commentators talk very, very stringently about that and say that, it is a desecration of the Shabbat. If you walk by and see, as an example, let's say you have a fence at your house that needs to be repaired, and you're on the Sabbath day and you walk by that fence and you look and say, boy, I need to really repair that fence next week. That is actually a fairly significant desecration of the Shabbat, because you're allowing yourself to focus on mundane weekly things. Now, these are all things that we, all of us fall prey to, So the goal is to really make an effort to guard our Shabbat, which is one of the reasons why we light 2 candles on the Sabbath. The reason there are 2 candles that are kindled on the Shabbat is to remember and to guard the Sabbath. So there's 2 different aspects. There's a spiritual aspect and a literal aspect to the Sabbath. In this case, we were to remember and to guard. So we have to guard the Sabbath, which is, by the way, what the phrase shomer means. So this is just an education point here. Shomer Shabbat or Shomer Shabbos. Usually you'll hear it Shomer Shabbos because that's more the Ashkenazi way of saying it. Shomer Shabbat would be more of a Sephardic way of saying it. But to be Shomer Shabbos means that you are somebody who keeps the Sabbath, guards the Sabbath, honors the Sabbath, etc., etc. Now, if you are walking about in the Jewish world and you're just having a conversation with a Jewish person and you're talking about, oh yes, I I'm Jewish or whatever, one of the questions that is very commonly asked is, are you Shomer? Well, they might actually say Shomer Shabbos, but sometimes they'll just say, are you Shomer? What they're asking you is, do you keep the Sabbath? The answer is, of course, yes. Another question, since we're on this topic, sometimes it gets asked. So you're in a Jewish environment or whatever, and at the marketplace, and you talk about, oh yeah, I eat kosher. Another question that's asked is, do you separate? Do you separate? And what they're asking is, do you separate meat and dairy? Because if you don't, no matter what you think, no matter what your emphasis on what your interpretation of the King James is, you're not eating kosher, period. And every Jew knows that. Even, I don't care what kind of Jew it is, Reform Jew, a Orthodox Jew, a Reconstructionist Jew, it doesn't matter. They'll ask you, do you separate? That's what that means. Another question that you might get asked, this is just, again, since I'm on this topic, some people might say, are you observant? I saw somebody had a cute meme on Facebook that somebody was asked, are you observant? And the person said, well, yeah, man, I am. I'm pretty astute at recognizing things. That's not what that means. Being observant means that you observe the mitzvot. And what's another one? There was another one that was on my mind, and it just flew out of my mind there. Maybe it'll come back to me in a second. Where do you daven? Where do you daven? That's what I was going to say. So this is an interesting one. So davening means praying. It's a Yiddish actually for praying. So if someone says, where do you daven? That means, where do you attend synagogue? That's what that means. So if you're out and about in the marketplace and you're like, oh, and they say, oh, you're Jewish. Yes, I am. Where do you daven? That means, where do you go to synagogue? Where do you pray is what they're literally asking you, but basically it means, where do you go to synagogue? So is that helpful? Hey, let me know if that was helpful. So here is Rashi. It says, Rashi explains that the word desecrate and mundane share the same root. Thus, one who abuses the holiness of the day by continuing to perform mundane activities desecrates the Shabbat. The Slonimer Rebbe explains that the root word for desecrate also denotes creating a vacuum or an empty space, which is an interesting take. It says it follows, he says, that one who ignores the Shabbat's holiness, treating it as just another day, creates a hole, as it were, in the very fabric of the Shabbat. This empty space becomes dead space, for which the death penalty is symbolically inflicted. Not only is the punishment measure for measure, it is self-inflicted. Now, let me just pause here and say something that it's real easy for people to get, it's just easy for us human beings in general to do this, to get focused on the do's and don'ts. And as I have read in rabbinic commentaries in times past, somebody can be really good at the do's and don'ts, following all the rules of you can't do that, you can't do that, you should do that, or you shouldn't do that, this, and yet still miss the entire spirit of the matter. And so I want to emphasize, whereas there are rules, so to speak, to the Shabbat. One of those rules, as we're going to talk about, is not to kindle a flame, but we're going to actually look at what that literally means. And so my point is that we as human beings, and particularly as a Jewish people, we have a tendency to really get into the weeds of the minutia of what we can or can't do, but at the same time, completely lose the spirit of it. It reminds me of a conversation I had. The whole concept of spirit of the law and letter of the law, once again, does not come from the New Testament. It actually comes from Judaism and Jewish thought. Once again, there's nothing new in the New Testament. Some people say, well, back in the old days, we lived by the letter of the law, and now we're supposed to live by the spirit of the law. Well, thank you for playing. That was wrong. As it turns out, that has been always the case. And I actually read this one time in a commentary. It's been a number of years ago. And I had a friend of mine who was an Orthodox rabbi, an acquaintance, a colleague, if you will, who's an Orthodox rabbi in Dallas, is the rabbi of a synagogue there. And so I sent this rabbi a question, and I just asked him way back then if he could give me his take on letter of the law versus spirit of the law. And so to my surprise, he wrote me back and said, great question, long answer. Can you come to my office? So I did. I drove there about an hour or so and spent a couple of hours in his office. And it just so happened it was during the 3 weeks. It was during the 3 weeks of between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. And I don't recall where in the 3 weeks we were. I don't think we were in the 9 days yet, but in any case, it was the 3 weeks. And he used the example that everybody, he's talking about in his Jewish, environment there, everybody is following the halacha, the minhag, which minhag is customs, halakha is law, and there's a difference between the two. Sometimes they're confused. But in any case, people are following this, they're doing everything. They're refraining from music. They're, not cutting their hair, not cutting their nails. They're, not having weddings and all this kind of stuff, right? But yet, he's like, but the spirit of backbiting is still here. The spirit of Lashon Hara is here. The criticisms, this group's doing this group's doing that. And he said, so here we are, we're doing everything exactly to the letter, but we've missed the entire spirit of what's really going on here. And in the case of the 3 weeks, the reason the temple was destroyed was ultimately because of Lashon Hara and because of our, evil speech. And so here we are doing all these things 100%. We're like, we're fasting to a certain extent on all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we're not really doing what actually the spirit of this is trying to get us to do. And so it's very possible that you could have the letter of the law without the spirit, and we're supposed to have both. And that was his point. And he was very passionate about it and very frustrated about it. And I'll never forget that conversation. And so when it comes to Shabbat keeping, it is very possible that we could have all the things in perfect right order. We're not doing this, and we could be really, really stringent and totally miss the point. And so it's not enough just to do all of the things, check the little boxes. I'm not doing this. I'm doing that. I'm not going to work. I'm not talking about work things. I'm saying the Kiddush and I'm saying the blessing over the challah, but yet not have the spirit of the day. And we need to make sure that we have that spirit of the day, because if we don't, if we just treat it like it's rote, or if we treat it like it's mundane, God forbid, then we create a hole in the spiritual fabric. Because understand, the Shabbat is spiritual. It's spiritual, deeply spiritual. When we enter the Sabbath, ladies and gentlemen, we enter into the dimension of Gan Eden. So Rabbi Trubin continues, he says, in the portion of Noach, we discuss how our thoughts, speech, and actions affect our experience of the Sabbath. Shabbat's quality is lessened when people who refrain from all the forbidden labors on Shabbat still allow their speech and thoughts to remain on a mundane level. This is exactly what I was talking about. We could be doing everything, but yet we're not really keeping the Sabbath. Let me give you an example that somebody told me about years ago. They were disappointed that that they went to a synagogue. I won't say which type of synagogue. It's not really important. Pardon me, a little carrot juice this morning. But anyway, they went to an Orthodox synagogue. They were on vacation. And so as a result, they decided that on the Sabbath, as opposed to just staying in the hotel room, they decided they would just go to the local Orthodox synagogue and just, be a part of it. No problem. They were disappointed that the conversation around the oneg table had to do with the local baseball team and other mundane conversations. And yet, this is an Orthodox synagogue. There's no music. Everything's done to the letter. Nobody drove there. God forbid. Oh, driving on Shabbat. Whoa, what a big sin. Whatever. And it's not at all breaking the Sabbath, actually. But all this being done, and then everybody's talking about sports and baseball. They were very disappointed. You might even say disillusioned. And I was talking to these people, it's been, like I said, years ago, and I said, well, there you go. You're doing everything. You're so perfect. You're checking every box. The big cardinal sin of driving. Oh my God. So crazy. I wish I had time to talk about that. But, they're not doing all this kind of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, they're breaking the Shabbat. And this is where, ladies and gentlemen, this is where you have to understand that some of these things, these things that we do are trying to guide us to a certain point in our thought processes. But if we're just focusing on the fence and not on the purpose of the fence, then we lose the message. And I hope I'm making myself clear. Some people can get so focused. And by the way, we as human beings, it's one thing to have a fence, and those are great. And they're not just great, they're necessary. Fence laws are absolutely necessary. But here's the problem we run into as human beings. We build a fence, and then we get so wrapped up. We just love them so much. We build a razor wire, and then we build an electrical fence in addition to all this. And then we build a moat, and then we build, walls. And then we become focused and obsessed with this stuff, all the while we forgot even why we built this stuff to begin with. And that's the problem. So we have to pay attention. Listen, the Slomoner Rebbe explains that each thought, speech, or act not in keeping with the day's Holy Spirit creates a spiritual hole that slowly eats away at the animating life force of Shabbat, leaving an inner dead space. An inner dead space. People who introduce the mundane into the Shabbat not only further cut their souls off from the rest of the nation celebrating the holiness of the day, but also even more significantly cut themselves off from their own spiritual roots. They reject consciously or even unconsciously the enormous opportunity inherent in experiencing the bliss and inner peace of Shabbat. So, man, we have to be so careful. This is why, there's a moment, some of you may be aware of this or not, but on Erev Shabbat, after we have the Kiddush, the very next thing we do is we wash our hands ceremonially. Now, the halakha, the halakha is that from the moment you wash your hands until the point at which you consume the first bite of challah, there's really no talking. maybe a whisper if you have to communicate something just in a whisper. But basically, there's no talking. And to some people, understandably so, it can seem awkward, like this awkward silence, especially if you don't know what's going on, clearly. But it's actually a beautiful moment. Now, well, the reason for this ultimately on the Peshat level is that you've just said a blessing of the hand washing. And if you say a blessing of the hand washing and then you immediately do something else, not like talking, right? Then you've kind of said a blessing in vain. So, because the purpose of the hand washing is to eat the bread. So the point is, you want to kind of remain silent until such a time as you can eat the bread. This is why when you go to kosher restaurants, there's a hand washing cup or station, and then next to it, there's always a basin with little pieces of bread in it. We have it here at our hand washing station. The reason for that is so that you can say the blessing of the hand washing and then say the blessing of hamotzi and eat a piece of bread. And then you've kind of fulfilled the reason. That's the Peshat level. But on a deeper level, you might say, on a remez level or drash level or even a sod level, that challah that's been made is a immensely spiritual loaf of bread. It's been made with the intentionality of the Shabbat. It has been separated and a piece of it burned, okay, prayed over, braided. The woman who made it while she's making it, has been offering up her intercession unto Hashem. That bread is infused with amazing holiness, if for no other reason that it was made specifically for the Holy Sabbath. It's not just a loaf of bread you buy at the market. This is bread that was made specifically to honor the Shabbat. And so the silence that occurs between the hand washing and the consuming of bread is an opportunity for us to connect with that sanctity. And it brings an amazing kedusha. And it elevates. This is what it means to connect with the spirit of the Holy Sabbath. The spirit of the Holy Sabbath. So all of us would do well. And this is why at the Sabbath table, we should make every effort to introduce words of Torah on our Shabbat, from Erev Shabbat to the day itself, to oneg, to third meal. We should talk about the Torah, talk about the things of God, and don't allow the Yetzer Hara to get into our lives and to make it mundane. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to do. But when we do that, we're either consciously or unconsciously tearing holes in the fabric of the Shabbat. Why does Rabbi Trugman use that verbiage? Because the Shabbat is a dimension. This is the thing I mentioned earlier. We don't notice it half the time because, we don't always have spiritual eyes to see. But when the sun sets and we enter the Sabbath, we have actually walked into the dimension of Gan Eden. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Shabbat, you're in a different universe. Yeah, it seems like everything's normal. It seems like you're still on planet Earth. It seems like, we're here in Texas. Yeah, but not really. We're walking in another dimension. We're walking in a garden. And ladies and gentlemen, if think about this, if you could wake up, if it were possible for you to wake up on Shabbat morning and you didn't see the world as you knew it, but rather you saw that you were literally in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, how would that change your speech and your actions? Just ask yourself that question. If I woke up on Shabbat morning and I literally was standing in the middle of a Garden of Eden, how would that change my thoughts, my speech, my actions? And ladies and gentlemen, that's the Holy Sabbath. End of our Aliyah today. We just scratched the surface. There's a whole lot more that we have to talk about. We will get to this with God's help. Maybe tomorrow I'll lead out with the kindling fire on a Shabbat, because there's a really, 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 really interesting take on that from Chinuk, which is a work of Jewish law, to find out what exactly that means. Because again, we get focused on the fence and the razor wire and the electric fence and the moat. And I think it was Zipporah said alligators. That's funny. The alligators we put in the moat. We get so focused on that stuff and we become obsessed with it that we make it like the biggest deal of all. Yeah, if you drive to Shabbat, you're a heretic. But if you sit around talking about the baseball game, you're perfectly fine. It's actually the exact opposite of that. But anyway, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. God bless all of you. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Hopefully it won't be, well, does it get, I forget. I've lost track. Rebbe's told me like 3 times when the weather is coming in, but I don't even know. I'm confused. So God bless you. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Shalom Aleichem.